But we begin, our top story is related to the lead that I just read about these potential tariffs, because that's what they are right now. Jim Lebenthal, you sold General Motors on the news of possible tariffs. I mean, President-elect Trump saying that he's going to impose them. Canada and Mexico, he's going to double down a bit on the China ones as well. Why did you sell GM on that social media post?
Yeah, I'm listening. You phrased that very carefully with the idea of possible tariffs.
Well, it is possible.
Yeah, and it's not certain, is what I'm hearing you say, and I agree. However, I lived through this in the first Trump administration, owning GM during that trade war, and it was frankly very unpleasant. I don't want to go through it again, and when I think about the actual number of cars that come from Mexico to be sold into U.S., putting a 25% tariff on those is going to do many things. It's going to raise the prices of those cars. That's going to eat into demand. We already know that consumers are having a hard time digesting prices for cars as they are right now. Or it's going to eat into margins for GM, or both. General Motors has been on fire. I think we can agree with that. The results have been fabulous. Analyst estimates have been going up. But with these tariffs, I think those analyst estimates are going to have to go down, albeit we don't know that they're actually going to happen. I do think, though, based on the experience of the first Trump administration, generally speaking, when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do something.
Sure, but I mean, he has used the threat of tariffs as leverage before.
Yes.
In negotiations, which have some today wondering whether this is simply a salvo,
Me too.
The opening salvo into a more prolonged negotiation. And that I would ask you on a day like today, why isn't today a buy? Why isn't an 8.5% sell-off on a stock you've loved for a variety of reasons? Yep. A buyback, the balance sheet, you've made the case that consumers are hanging in, you need new cars, the cars on the road have aged, all the things that you have listed over the past many months. Why isn't today a buying opportunity?
Well, it may turn out that it is a buying opportunity, and I'm not going to rule out the idea that I might get back into the name. But also, let's give the context here. This is a stock that's up almost 100% in 12 months. It's had a fabulous run, and if this news were not there, I do think it could get towards $70 a share. However, I simply can't ignore this news, and I have to reflect on the large gain that I've had so far in it. I know people like to often say to me, well, you've been in it for so long, and it's true. I have been in it for a long time. It's actually been a decent performer. It has underperformed the S&P 500, I will grant you that, but over the last 10 years, it's had an annual return of 8%. It's not bad. And I can't ignore these news. Again, just going back to where I started, having lived through it once already, I have the experience from which judgment comes. Okay. My judgment says, let's sell it, let the dust settle, maybe I'll get back into it.
Do you have a view on this, Josh?
I would take the president at his the incoming president at his word. He'll probably do something. But I think most of what's probably going to happen is talking and negotiating. I read Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. I understand he didn't write it, he dictated it, but there's an entire chapter about his negotiating strategy, which is you walk into the room and you punch the other person in the mouth, metaphorically. It's effective. It gets people's attention. I'm not a huge fan of all this, but I'm just going to tell you, we've seen numerous instances where starting off the negotiation as a hardliner and then ultimately coming to a deal had been effective during the first term, and I wouldn't rule that out this time. So I'm not saying Jim's trade is not a good trade. He's made money with GM, and I totally get not wanting to sit through this for the next year. But the market is not really reacting. You have individual stock prices reacting to this, but overall, the market is sort of calling the bluff. And then the question becomes, is Scott Bessent there to just kind of like whitewash the things that Trump is tweeting and maybe spin them? Or is he there in a consultative role where he can make some important points about the efficacy of these things? If you think back to some of the agricultural tariffs that China retaliated with, they were our largest export market. In 2014, they bought $20-something billion worth of U.S. agricultural exports. And then in 2019, they bought more like $9 billion. It had a huge negative impact. The Trump administration turned around and did a $28 billion multi-year subsidy to U.S. farmers in order to not lose that vote. That's more than we spent on nuclear. That's more than we spent on Navy destroyers. That's more than the State Department's budget. So sometimes you'll see a tariff, you'll see a trade war, and then you'll see the federal government come around the back end and say, sorry about that, here's what we're going to do for this industry.
Right.
So I think the major point here is, yes, take it seriously. No, don't take it literally.
So you're at the lows of the day for the stock, which is having its worst day, by the way, since December of 2022. So we'll continue to, obviously watch that.